Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the Cowie and Woodward properties. I didn't know if somebody was prepared to talk about this. I think the purpose of bringing this up was to talk about the Habitat for Humanity contract that we had to purchase the Cowie property. I think that's what kind of instigated this. Mr. Hahn, are you prepared to talk about this?
I don't know what much else you want me to add of what we discussed in the past, but you know, the properties on Cowie Avenue were ones that we had a contract signed with the Habitat for Humanity. That contract expired. They are still very interested in acquiring the properties and building single-family homes on it, but it would require the mayor's signature on that new contract. So that's what started the ones on this particular.
Okay. And then the Woodward property, I think we had already surplused that property, hadn't we?
Both of them.
It has it been surplused?
Sherry, I believe it has been surplused, and we just
and I think they've both been surplused,
Yeah,
haven't they? Or both of
I
them,
believe
all of
they
them
both
have been
have been
surplused.
yeah.
But to donate for these kinds of things, because if you remember, the Woodward one was to Honk.
But in fact, if we're not going to do that with Honk, we have to change that surplusing to the method of disposal that we're going to dispose of it. And there had been some discussion about us going out and putting those out for advertising and doing it similar to what the city of Paducah did. I know Mr. Hahn has worked on advertisement to put out there to see not only but best proposals coming in for that land use and what benefits it would have for the city in the long run. We just never did put those out when the Honk thing came up.
We have not, when the Honk thing came up, at the time when we were discussing that, folks seemed to be in favor of that, so that's where we are here today to see if
but there's no paperwork, right? It's been signed. No paperwork has been signed with Honk.
No,
everything is fine with that. So if in
no
fact
paperwork is in effect for
either one,
any of them at this particular point.
But if we want to reconsider what we're going to do with the Woodward properties, then we have to change the method of disposal through the surplusing, and then go ahead and figure out how to advertise them to get them done. Right.
Correct. Yeah. And so that I can let them know that, that we're moving in a different direction, so that they can move on also.
Okay.
Now, the Cowie, that's not, you're not talking about Cowie, though, just Woodward?
I would say we're talking about all of them. Yeah.
All of them?
The Cowie needs to be re-signed, correct?
Yeah, there's the two on Cowie.
Everybody's still in agreement.
And then, I guess it's technically two on Woodward as well, right?
There's
It's
two lots.
one parcel
we
that had been
subdivided the property and had it put into two lots.
Yeah.
Didn't we just agree to both of them before? They both need signed?
Is there some other idea that's been floated around to what to do with these?
I suppose not. Mr. Nicely, did you have a?
My question is people that signed the contract, they let it run out.
Yes.
What if they signed it again, are we gonna let it run out?
Maybe, but I think they said that they had a tough time getting things approved on their end of it, but that a lot of that was in place now and that they'd be able to move more quickly.
Can we have a B plan instead of?
Not that I know of, no. There's not necessarily a plan B.
Well, if they don't do it, what are we gonna do?
Well, I would guess we could
try
move
to sell it.
forward with try to sell them the same way we with any other property.
The only way you're gonna sell them is if you tear it down, then you can
that's
sell
right.
the lots.
Oh, that's right. I agree.
Because you can't give them to me.
Yeah, I think
I would not take them.
We've poured enough money into them. I don't think we should pay to tear them down. Because if you do Habitat pays to tear them down.
Right.
Yeah.
That's correct.
I don't understand why we just don't sign it and move on.
Okay.
On both properties.
Yeah.
Has anybody got a problem with that?
For sure on Cowie.
The whole purpose was
You
to
already talked
avoid,
about both properties.
Yeah,
Okay.
those poor people living next to that nightmare, I just feel horrible for them.
Cowie's a different situation. Cowie's the ones that, I know Ms. Fetty and I, we sat down and looked at that pretty, I think, intensively, and the numbers, if you go tearing those properties down, it just doesn't work us getting our money back. There's no way, even if we try to sell those lots, you'd have to sell those lots for $35,000 a piece. Those lots aren't going to sell for that for us to even come back. So us taking the amount of money to tear those properties down didn't make sense. However, looking at the Woodward property, that's already vacant. It's already there. There's 2 lots there. If, in fact, this council wanted to reconsider giving that to Honk, since we never did have a contract with Honk, all we did was
Never
had
had
some
a contract with
conversations with them and wanted to look at advertising them, it may be a way to get some of that money back, because we've only got somewhere right around $20,000 in those 2 properties.
1,152
In those 2 properties, we probably can sell those 2 lots for more than $10,000 apiece, or at least if we sell them for $10,000 apiece, we at least get our money back from that, and doing that. So that was, I think, the whole purpose of reconsidering both of these tonight, was to look at it, just to redo the signing of the Cowie property so we make sure we get those tore down and get single-family homes built. The Woodward property is reconsidering exactly what we wanted to do with that, whether we wanted to move forward with trying to do something with Honk, or, in fact, try to advertise them and maybe sell them to somebody who wants to develop, whatever it would be.
I think that sounds like a good plan. And just to clarify, does Honk actually purchase the property?
No, I think
No.
we donated to them.
Okay.
It's the
Okay.
same as Habitat, it's a
Then- then-
donation.
Okay.
Then we should use Habitat for Cowie and then try to sell Woodward.
I agree,
Yeah.
Yes.
I agree.
Okay.
because we've already spent the money to tear down the houses,
Yeah.
house on Woodward, and we spent the money to subdivide the property. So now we have 2 viable properties that we can sell.
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Makes sense, yeah.
All right.
I got a
think-
question.
Yeah.
Would the city consider if somebody that was on that street already wanted to buy 1 lot?
I don't know why they wouldn't consider it to anybody.
Right.
I would say yes,
Yeah.
because we're going to advertise them separately. If somebody wants to come forward and buy one, they certainly could.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be to sell them separately.
Yeah. I would think we'd offer them separately so that we get the,
Yeah, because they have separate utilities and everything, right?
that's correct.
Are you controlling what they do with it if they buy it? Because at one point, y'all were going to put a lot of restrictions on what you wanted them to do with that property.
Well, what we talked about originally was doing like, was Paducah did. They put it out for bid, and they asked for proposals of what people want to build. And then we look at it and say, yeah, this one, and it was like a point system is what the, depending what they want to do, how much they want to pay for the lot, what kind of structure they're building, what kind of exterior it has on it, and all of that sort of thing. We look, and just like we do when we bid a construction project, we'll take the best bid.
Isn't there a draft of that application floating out there?
Yes.
From the, yes.
Yeah, from the point system. It seemed like
Yes. We've
got
at
it.
some period of time in the last year or so, we've
That's
circulated that and
Yeah.
kind of worked through that.
So for the next council meeting, would you mind redistributing that again?
I will
And we can
send
take a
that
look
out.
and try to take action on moving forward to bid the properties, or put them out to bid?
I've got that, so I can send that out to everyone tomorrow.
Wasn't that so strict that you didn't get anybody that wanted it?
We never did
We
advertise.
never did do it. The honk came forward in the middle, well, we had the horse in the middle of the stream, and it was, so we just,
And just to get this straight about the restrictions we were trying to say, the only thing we wanted to make sure, we wanted to try to guarantee was home ownership.
that's correct.
That's what we wanted to try to
That was a
guarantee.
big
And we
thing.
didn't want somebody building another duplex or fourplex over there and have it as a rental property. What we wanted to try to do was encourage home, single-family home ownership. That was the restrictions that we were talking about.
Is the city still mowing that?
I
I would assume so.
Yeah, we own it. So in the meantime, is there any reason why I couldn't go ahead and sign the contract with Habitat for Humanity, then it sounds like council's in agreement that we're going to move forward on Cowie, yes.
I will get
Okay.
them to get us an updated contract,
Okay,
just to change the dates on it, basically, is all we'd have to do. I think Mr. Gatlin has already looked at it when you signed the first one and was okay with it, so.
That's both, right?
Can we tell them that if they don't get it done this time, then we're gonna move on? I mean, how long?
Well, normally it's like I believe they had like a 2-month time frame from the
Diligence.
time the mayor signs it to when they'll acquire them, so that they can do all their due diligence of,
Sounds good.
yeah.
So I understand in 2 months they're gonna start doing something with it.
I'm not going to say that. I mean,
They're gonna
all I can
purchase,
tell
or
you
they're
is
gonna
that
take
in 2
ownership.
months that they will acquire it, that within 2 months that the property will transfer over to them. Maybe sooner. I don't know,
Well,
depending.
once they get it, how long are they gonna let it sit?
Well, we could certainly try to maybe put something like that in the contract, that they have to at least get them torn down or something.
Yeah.
that would be good.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
good.
Okay. All right, we'll make sure there's some kind of verbiage in there regarding that. Okay, thank you. All right, if there's nothing else to add, then I'll move on to the transient homes and Airbnb. I don't know who was going to lead this discussion.
Yeah, give him another paper. All right. When this came up, just to give you all some background on this, when we got these proposals, I know there was some more discussion, but just to give you a staff kind of review about what decisions were made when we started getting the phone calls. And I know Mr. Gallen looked into it a little bit, so hopefully he can jump in here and talk about it. But when we looked at transient homes, that was hotels, things like that. That's not allowed in a residential zone. So we were looking at these overnight stays, these week stays is the very same thing. So in our zoning, that is prohibited in our residential zones. Correct, Dave?
That's correct. Just from the definitions.
Just from the definitions.
That's in our opinion now.
That was our opinion about just what the
I've had
definition
conversation
was.
with Jack, and as you say, he's probably got something to.
Right.
I agree. I agree with that.
Yeah.
You know, so if in fact we were going to allow this kind of business or this kind of, I guess, operation within our residential zone, it's staff's belief that we need to change the zone or put that as an allowable use in the residential zone somehow. So if that's what council wants to do, then we need to be looking at changing that in the residential zone.
Our committee recommended we don't do it.
So you don't allow it?
We don't want it.
You've already got people that are doing it without permission now.
Well, then they'll start getting tickets.
Then how do you find them?
Oh, we know a bunch of them now.
Yeah, we already know them. We already know them now.
I mean, you all
One
can
of my
vote for it
neighbors
if you
wants
like.
to
I'm
do
just
it
saying,
now.
as our committee, we're gonna recommend not to do it.
I don't see any great problem with doing this. I think if we restrict it to homes that are owner-occupied, because, I mean, the concern with having a lot of rental properties, hotels, I think, is if somebody just lets the property go down. But if they're occupying the property themselves, they're not going to allow that. And so if we have it as an owner-occupied property and allow this in residential areas, I don't really see a big problem with it. These people are there and gone in short periods of time. If it's in somebody's own home, they're going to be taking care of the property themselves because they're living there too. I don't see a big problem with Airbnbs.
Well, a friend of mine, a neighbor, a friend of mine wants to do it.
I know.
And, yeah, she's called everybody.
She is.
Does she walk a lot?
Would she occupy it?
Yes.
Yes.
She'd live there?
She'd
Use it as
Yeah,
a bed and
yeah.
breakfast.
She'd live on the
Yeah.
first floor and she'd rent out the second floor. And you know, I don't want to upset her, but I'm not in favor of having all these strangers in and out. I don't know anything about these people. I don't know what kind of background checks they're going to be doing on these people. I mean, I take care of 5 grandchildren, and I don't like strangers in my neighborhood that I don't know who they are. I mean, and, you know, and she's not gonna be a happy camper with me, but that's just the way I feel.
That's the way it goes sometimes.
Mrs. Fetty?
I like how Randy put it, an owner occupied, and allowing it that way to where it's then, you know, this particular resident called me as well. Her and her husband want to run a bed and breakfast. They want to, that's how they want to spend their retirement. So if we're saying that they have to stay in the house, then it's almost like they're taking responsibility for their guest. At that point, it's more of a guest staying in their house than necessarily a transient person.
They don't know these people.
Well, I understand, but they're taking responsibility by bringing them into their house.
And they have to do there's a process you have to have an account to do Airbnb, and you have to be evaluated by anybody.
Well, they're lovely people.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
No, but I mean, the Airbnb people have to rate their guests too. So if somebody wants to rent to an Airbnb client, they see bad reviews, like somebody that.
If you had grandkids, would you be comfortable?
Yeah, because we do Airbnb all the time. So, I mean.
You're the transient people?
We're the transient people. But my bigger concern, because the Airbnb has a great program because the renter evaluates the rentee and vice versa. So when somebody wants to rent from Airbnb, they look at that renter's record, and if they see poor evaluations from previous, they won't rent to them. So they have to be good guests to be able to rent.
Got enough cars on Graves Avenue to sink a battleship already.
But like the one we did, most recent one we did was in Hanover. This guy does it, he gets maybe 6 a year. It's just, you know, it's not like it's something every week. You know, maybe some of them might be more often. I don't know about the guy on Commonwealth, how often he gets them. Because, I mean, there's so many Airbnbs, people aren't always going to be on Graves Avenue or whatever. But my bigger concern, I know Jack sent something, I can't find it.
Okay.
About the Louisville.
Yeah, I can summarize it.
Yeah, because I
I
read
sent
half
it to
of
you
and
because
now I
you
can't find it.
specifically asked me to send something to you. I'm not excluding other people, but.
Yeah.
So I looked throughout the state at who has addressed this issue, because obviously this Airbnb issue seems to be a hot issue. I know that, Dave, you went to PDS, or Mark went to PDS. PDS put together a pretty nice Excel spreadsheet, and they were providing us information from, you know, California to Florida, and a lot of that is just not applicable here. But here's what Louisville has done, and I think to some extent it's addressed maybe the concerns of everyone in this room, maybe. Now, the Louisville solution is probably a little too bureaucratic a solution for Erlanger, but here's what Louisville has done, is they've created an application process very similar to our rental registry, that if you want to do these short-term rentals, there's an application process. And they have like 30 different residential zones in Louisville, okay? And so to make sense of it, they have really dense residential zones, and then they have less dense residential zones. Because obviously with a consolidated government, that's a different vehicle in Louisville. I mean, you have your urban core areas, and then you've got your 1 acre, 1.5 acre suburb areas. And for all intents and purposes, in the areas that are more densely populated, the residential zones that are more densely populated, they've made them as conditional use permits, okay? And there's almost a process very similar to what Ms. Fetty proposed with her chicken ordinance, that this conditional use process is, if you're in these higher dense zones, that you've got to notify all your neighbors, and your neighbors can show up at the conditional use permit. I mean, again, they're going to be notified in most cases anyway, but there's a little bit more teeth to it than your normal notice of a conditional use permit. And they can basically say, yeah, we want this person to have it, we don't want this person to have it. Specifically built into the ordinance in these conditional use areas, if there's a parking issue, or if there's only street side parking, or there's not ample parking available in the driveway, a conditional use permit shall not be permitted. I mean, so they're giving the Board of Adjustments, in my opinion, no ability, but our Board of Adjustments has certainly shown that there are ordinances out there that say shall or shall not, and they don't always follow that. But Louisville has basically said, hey, you cannot even grant a conditional use permit if these people cannot park in a driveway. So I mean, that's just one example to kind of deal with some of these street parking issues. In the areas that are less dense in Louisville, They're allowable under the following conditions. Here's the conditions that Louisville has. Number one, the maximum stay for a guest shall be 29 days. Number two is that the dwelling unit shall be limited to a single short-term rental contract at a time. At no time shall more persons reside in the short-term rental than 2 times the number of bedrooms plus 4. There is no food or alcohol which shall be served or otherwise provided to the host or guest, so I think that would kill off the whole bed and breakfast concept. There's no outdoor signage which is allowed, so there's no way that you would know this is a short-term rental. The short-term rental and host shall meet all additional requirements set forth in the Louisville Metro Court of Ordinances. I dug through that a little bit more, and really what's happening in this situation is once you make that application, you're sort of subjecting yourself to code enforcement to come to your home to make sure you have adequate smoke detectors, that you have adequate ingress, egress. They do charge for that application, and my argument would be as the justification for that charge is somebody, code enforcement or someone is going to have to go out there and make sure that this is suitable. And that there also is a clearly marked evacuation plan shall be posted on the premises. These applications are renewable yearly, and they do not pass from owner to owner. So if you sold your property, the new owner would come in. Louisville also has a third bucket. So there's a third bucket of zones, which is owner-occupied only. And for the life of me, I don't know why they say in R5, R5B, R6, and R7 we're only allowing owner-occupied, but there is a series of zones in Louisville, and they actually identify those communities, and I know enough about Louisville to know that those communities are older homes, more densely populated, but have some historical charm and character. So my guess is those neighborhood associations got together and said, hey, we don't want a bunch of transient people in here unless the owner is there. So again, it's very clear that they have 3 separate buckets that they put people into. All 3 buckets, though, require a very rigorous application process, and the city pretty much can deny one of these for almost any reason as well. So even if it meets all of these definitions, there's some language in there that I think is vague enough that a city could turn one down. So while they don't specifically say it has to be an Airbnb, I think that you certainly could structure the application and code enforcement or whoever the officer would be that approves these could kind of go through it and make sure that there's some quality control process in place. With the understanding, if somebody is turned down, they could always go to our Board of Adjustments. I'm just saying. Well, I'm just saying, you're always going to open that door.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Mr. Nicely?
You was mentioning the people that lives in one. 2 people per bedroom. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. What their ordinance states, yeah.
And we're going to go and do that. We have it right now that exists. You went to some people, and they put 7, 8 people in a house that's got 2 bedrooms. We can't enforce it. We're asking for problems. And I've had the guy from Covington wanted to rent a house for me so he could do that. I said, no way. You're asking for problems when you even get into this, and we got enough without it.
There's more control over this than rental property. There's more control over this than there would be rental property. We have no control really over rental property unless they break the law.
I can't hear you. Use your mic.
I said, we don't have much control over rental property unless they break the law. Anybody can rent property. But at least these, there's regulations and evaluations and short-term and.
If we put them in place.
Yeah.
Incentives for the owners to maintain.
Yeah, if the owners don't maintain the property, nobody's going to want to stay there.
Yeah. There's
So,
recommendations
I think
and
this-
reviews.
I've put this out there to some people that live in various parts of the city, and most of them were very for it because they all had the same opinion. They said, well, it sure beats rental properties that have no regulations.
Right.
But
Yes, we do, or we have it. In the city, we have to keep ours up because personally, we keep it up, but if something's wrong, the tenant complains. And if we don't do it, if you don't do it, they come to the city and tell you you got to fix it. But when you come along and get this many people in it, they wrecked the house. They done it over here on Locust Street. They had about 10 people in there. There were 2 bedrooms, I think. But we do not rent. We have a yearly lease. And we come along and have so many people at the house. If we got a 2-bedroom, we're not going to rent it to somebody that's got 8 kids, because they tear your property up. But you're going into this, and the guy in Covington wanted to come and rent a house for me so he could do this. I said, there's no way. And that you're asking for a lot of trouble when you go into that. And if you want it, I don't want to be in my neighborhood.
So right now, we're policing the rental properties. We're doing those things, we're getting the registries, we're contacting the people. This lease has a mechanism in it that, thought I had it on. This at least has a mechanism that is self-policing, that helps, you know, get those tenants out. We limit the number of time, and I think Airbnb actually limits the amount of time you can stay somewhere too. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's a contract for that short period of time, so there is the ability to say, hey, you're not being a good neighbor, you're out, you're gone. So, you know, I've done this myself. I think it works out great, and I think it's going to give us the ability to bring in people that are using homes that they aren't living here, but they're using to, you know, bring in other folks for the area. I mean, the one gentleman that came in, one of his ideas was to have this area for like some of these pilots. You know, instead of staying at some of the hotels, they stay here, you know, for the short periods. So
we had a place over here on Baker Street. They built that just for pilots and stewardess, but that didn't work.
It died when Comair went out of business.
That's right.
Yeah, Baker and Erlanger Road.
Yeah.
Don,
Comair killed it, yeah.
when you're thinking about the owner occupied only, would that satisfy your concerns? Because then the owner has to stay in the house when they're renting it. Yeah. Correct.
Everyone I've stayed at, the owner was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'd be more careful who they let stay.
Yeah, I mean,
Right. If they're not, they get bad evaluations and nobody's
Yeah.
gonna want to stay there.
Not really.
well, we would put like having it as a quality control check necessary,
So if it's not Airbnb,
basically,
we can't
not
say
putting that it would be
Airbnb, but
Airbnb.
it has to be something similar.
That's right.
What's that? Yeah, sure. Did you have something, Mrs. Cowell?
Yes, my question was, can we regulate only Airbnb? I don't think we can. I think you have to open it up. And then how do we know that it's being regulated? I mean, I understand Airbnb does a fantastic job, but if it's not Airbnb, that could pose some problems if they're not, you know what I'm saying? That they don't
Yeah.
evaluate people.
I mean,
Right, it
if we
could be a secondhand, a third, you know, the lower tier of that, and it qualifies for them, but it's not up to Airbnb standards.
Right.
I agree with you on that.
yeah, I mean, while I don't think we could regulate
I don't think we're allowed to say.
a company,
be.
yeah, Airbnb, but could we regulate the service, that they had to be part of a rating service
And
to
like
be
Jack
able
said,
to
we could turn them
qualify?
down anytime.
Right,
You just have to be consistent.
yeah.
What I wanted to say is I think you guys had to keep in mind, not too long ago, the issue came up about the signage, the signs to honor people in the city. And it seems like a lot of times people bring ideas in that they will profit from. And you guys seem like, well, okay, I guess we should let them do it. And a lot of times that happens. Now, with that particular one, that went down the tubes because you spent a lot of time checking into it and like, well, we need to just honor employees of the city because of the whole liability issue and put it in the park and all that. And then it turned out that when I came up and talked about it with some common sense and said, people are not going to like this doesn't make any sense, that whole issue was dropped. Remember, I think that's what I'm talking about, the banners?
Yeah.
So here in this case, somebody comes up here who has a business in Latonia and he's making money off of this. He comes up and says, hey, I'd like to buy some Erlanger homes and make some more money doing this. Now, according to this proposal, he could not do that because he can't live in those homes. So the person who brought the issue to the first point, he's out. He's not going to work for him. But now you guys are spending a lot of time trying to bend over backwards for other people who aren't even doing it, who may want to do it. And it just seems like you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. This guy came up with an idea. He can't benefit from them. If there are people out there who want to do this, let them come up here to these meetings, just like the people who wanted chickens and the people who didn't want chickens. Have it brought up here, have them discuss it up here. The people who have B&Bs right now that are not in compliance with the law, send them a letter. Say, we have discovered you are not in compliance with the law. We're going to put a stay on any type of citations or anything, but we'd like to talk to you about it. We'd like to know if you want this to continue, if the law to allow it or not allow it, and so forth. It seems like that is the avenue you need to go on instead of trying to decide this just among yourselves. Involve the ones who are already doing it and invite the ones who want to do it. If you guys have them come up here to the committee meetings. Have them come up here.
Other commitment tonight, that's why they're not here.
Well, right, but I mean, it needs to be brought out to more in the open, not just people you know who want to do it. There are people who don't. It needs to be publicized more, and it needs to be done that way. And just because somebody comes with an idea, it doesn't mean you have to do it.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, just to clarify, I think it is the first time tonight that we've even mentioned this whole thing with the person would have to occupy the facility. You know, I think that's just came from what Jack was talking about with Louisville, so.
Yeah, I'm just throwing ideas out there. I mean, I'm just.
But there's,
all right, there's
one thing about it. Even when you got these people, and they're undesirable, you've got to have a reason. Just because neighbors don't like them, you can't evict them. You know that.
Agree. They have to violate some condition we've put on them.
That's right. They got to violate. They want to fight or something. Landlord can't do nothing about it. That's a police matter. Until we get a police report, then we can evict them. But it takes at least a month to evict someone. That's a heck of a long time.
These are a little different situation because these people are not really going to qualify under the landlord-tenant laws. I mean, these are very short-term contractual situations. I'm not aware, I don't know if Mr. Blankenship or Mr. Wickman have seen them in their legal tour of duty. I'm not aware of any squatter in one of these Airbnb situations who's just said that they're not going to move out. You know what I mean?
Where do you think I
don't
got
know
my
if we've
That's where I got my house. What do you mean?
I mean, I don't know how likely that is. I hear your point. I mean, if you had someone you rented your house to for a night and they said, I'm not leaving, I mean, I think the police probably would remove someone in that situation. I think. It's probably officer by officer. I'm getting a blank stare over here. Okay, fair enough.
I think with the city, I think we got enough problems with that. I do own a few pieces of property, and I know some of the things we can do and can't do. And you open up a big can of worms that if you get that, would you want a house next door to you to rent out like that?
I think overall,
If the people needed legal services, I'd help them market it.
Always about the buck.
Well,
Always about the buck.
I don't need the money that bad.
I understand.
If you want to do that, you can, but if you want to get people like this, Erlanger is going to go down, down, down. Now, if you want people want to vote for it, I can tell you it's going to go down. And once you get this in here, we've had people in here to do it, and you say, we can control it. You can't control it because they say, I'm just visiting. You can't keep, and you can't keep people from visiting.
I think ultimate, Mrs. Reckers, you want to? Yeah, would you mind?
have also been a user of Airbnb. I had the opportunity to, if I wanted to, rent my entire house the week of the All-Star game for $1,500 on Jacqueline Drive. I chose not to because I didn't want to clean. But I could have had that opportunity, even though with or without this ordinance. As someone who has worked with people who travel in from China and other places, they use Airbnb because it's cheaper than a hotel for an entire week. They're not scumbags. They're using an electronic system that's rated typically when an owner is there. So as for riffraff, if you're going to turn this down, I would demand every single by-the-night rent opportunity, cash only, on Craigslist to be investigated and fined as well. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think ultimately it sounds like the discussions to be continued, and that we would have to, look into the other, maybe look into how other cities have done it. But ultimately what we have to realize is that if we pass the ordinance, it still requires a text amendment for zoning, so then it would have to go in front of KCPC to get their approval as well. So, I mean, this is probably a
two-step process. Yeah, so there'd be a text amendment and then an ordinance as well to regulate, but the text amendment would have to come about because the current zone would not allow this.
Mrs. Skidmore?
Better be prepared to hire a lot of people to work in the zoning department then.
Yeah, or for the applications, yeah.
No, to enforce the.
Oh, to enforce it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, code
Go ahead.
enforce it. Yeah.
I made a lot of phone calls a month or so when this all first started happening, and everybody that I called Boone County Zoning and Planning, they couldn't send me anywhere. They couldn't give me any information. Everybody kept telling me to go to Meet Northern Kentucky, the Northern Kentucky Convention Center in downtown Covington. And I'll just read like about 4 paragraphs. I won't read the whole thing to you. This is, thank you for your message and inquiry about Airbnb locations. Airbnb and other similar entities have become a major part of the tourism hospitality industry. Yet there are issues concerning the regulation and compliance of this growing social economy. There are specific KRS regulations in Kentucky that define how a hotel or bed and breakfast can operate. All lodging establishments are required to assess and collect Kentucky state sales and Kentucky transient bed tax for each night stay. Also, there are zoning and other related regulations that may apply, depending on the jurisdiction. If we locate an establishment, usually a residence, who is using Airbnb or a related booking service, we will send them information on Kentucky regulations and required taxes. To date, the enforcement of these regulations have been inconsistent in Kentucky. The Kentucky General Assembly has conducted committee meetings on the subject, and my understanding is the issue is being reviewed with the Kentucky Revenue Cabinet and possibly other state committees. We're hopeful for a statewide enforcement plan or possibly an agreement with Airbnb and those related organizations, which will require full compliance with Kentucky state law as part of their booking policy. That's what I got. And he said if I needed anything else or there was any other questions, feel free to email him.
Yeah, so things such as Louisville's ordinance also, and I didn't bring this up, but they do impose an 8.5% transient hotel tax, which is pretty standard, and that's going to comply with the KRS on that issue. And the biggest area where the state gets in is when these people are circumventing the alcohol beverage laws, and they're serving wine or they're serving beer, and that's why the Louisville ordinance says you cannot serve food or alcohol to comply with those state requirements. But it's no doubt that there's a lot of these out there, and there's literally no city in northern Kentucky that's really dealt with this issue. So there's a whole lot of them out there that are kind of operating probably contrary to the zoning laws. But I don't also think there's a lot of enforcement going on either.
If you want to see the eclipse, Airbnb will rent they can rent a room for that for $3,000 for the one night.
How many people you think's going to be in that house? Is your business that much, you want some more business?
I'm sorry?
You want this passed so you
I
get
don't,
more
no,
business?
you're getting me wrong. I was instructed to provide information. I don't have a dog in this fight. I really don't. I don't.
If I could.
I'm just doing my job by providing information. You all are the voters. I'm just the
If I could
messenger.
mention one thing also about PDS. PDS is redoing, they hired a consultant to review all of the zoning regulations for all of Kenton County. So that they hired a consultant to do that. That Airbnb is one thing that they're going to be looking at, of how they would address those in the zoning regulations, because they're not now. Now, this won't be out for a while. I mean, it's.
We're waiting on the sign regulations,
That's
right?
correct.
That's been a couple years now.
So it'll probably be 6 months, but I just bring that up to you.
It's a good point. Thank you. All right, so is the interest to try to have Mr. Gatlin develop something here? I'm just trying to make sure we're taking the right direction, or are we tabling this discussion?
I don't think we should table it. I mean, it's obvious there's a lot of people that are for it. I just don't happen to be one.
Okay.
Well, I want to see something, I mean, there's other companies that's going to do this besides big, Airbnb. Let's see what they got.
Yeah, I would like to, I'm sorry. No. I would like to see a draft ordinance on this, adopting it, allowing it, but I would like to see it limited to the owner-occupied type facility. But I like some of the requirements that the Louisville ordinance has in it. It is, as you say, I think it might be a little too bureaucratic for my taste, but I do like a lot of the requirements about the number of people and the length of the stay and all this. And, although we can't necessarily regulate to say you only do Airbnb, could we not, in essence, incorporate Airbnb's requirements into our contract so that,
Absolutely.
into our ordinance, so that they kind of have to be there?
Mm-hmm.
So why don't I work on that draft? I'll work with staff and code enforcement, and why don't we, at the next committee meeting, I'll have that draft ready for everybody to review and have their discussion on. Does that work, Randy?
Good for me.
Okay.
Sounds good. All right. Okay. Thank you. There's no other discussion there. We'll move on to the zoning ordinance text amendment, the two-family in the R1F zone. Are you prepared to talk about that, Mr. Hahn?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
We received a request from a gentleman who owns the property at the end of Place Street, who wants to construct two-family dwellings on the property. This property's in the R1F zone, and two-family dwellings are no longer a permitted use in that zone. In let's see, October of 1987, we took them out, did a text amendment, and took them out as a permitted use out of that zone. So he is requesting that we entertain putting them back into that zone.
And just so I understand, because the existing structures are made as two-family homes, is that?
What he's talking about here is vacant property. He wants to build two.
Okay.
He wants to subdivide it. It's a big piece of property that butts up against the Silver Lake Recreation folks. He wants to subdivide that into two lots and build two families. On the other side of the street, there are currently 3 two-families that were built prior to us taking them out of there.
But that's also R1F zone?
Yes, it's all in the R1F zone.
Okay. I thought I saw someone in there.
Yes,
Mrs. Cowie?
I was on council when we voted not to add any more duplexes. And I remember Ken Yaden was my partner, and he had been on the police force, and he was saying that's where all our calls go, to these apartments. And I tend to agree with him. I think we've got enough duplexes and apartments in the city that we don't need more. So I would be against it.
Okay.
My opinion.
Yeah, thank you.
They could go to the Board of Adjustments and get it approved.
We better stop doing that. We'll be looking for a whole new
Yeah.
Any other discussion on that? Any other thoughts?
No.
I agree with Vicky. I would
Yeah, I
not
do
be in
too.
favor
Yeah.
of changing this.
Okay. It looks like generally people are shaking their heads that they wouldn't be in favor.
What was the location again? You said it was by
Place
Silver Lake.
Street. Place off of Division.
Oh, the division, okay.
Yeah.
Right behind the, Silver Lake.
Yeah.
But if we do a text amendment or to do this, that would cover a lot
Need
more
a
than
text
just that
amendment to
spot.
add two families as a
Right.
permitted use or conditional, however, if you wanted to do it.
Right, it wouldn't just be limited to that area, it'd be the whole
It'd
whole
be the
zone.
whole R1F zone, correct.
We do have a zone that allows two families right now.
Yeah, in the multifamily zone, we took them out of all, in the R1F and R1G zones, they used to be a permitted use. And no longer, they're just in the R2s and R3 zones now.
And I know it got talked about both ways with the Commonwealth Station project, but was there a multi-family portion of that as well?
There is, in the Commonwealth Station, it does allow a component of
They're attached single family.
attached single family,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's attached single family.
Okay.
I don't think there's any,
No apartments
I
or,
don't think so. Well, below and above.
But, right,
So commercial below.
I think in that area, there is a component of that they could put those in there, yes.
okay. And I hear some discussion over there. Any other thoughts?
They were just trying to figure out where Place Street is.
Oh, okay. Mr. Nicely?
Personally, if I bought a piece of property and it wasn't zoned for two families, then I buy it. Then the city comes along and rezones it. That's not fair for the property owner that's got a one-family house. It's not fair for a resident there.
I agree.
So I think it should be like it is. Put it on the table.
Well, wouldn't it have
Well,
been a variance? I mean, it
No,
wouldn't
they
have been a
couldn't,
change.
that's not something that's not something the board can rule on, is allowing something that the zoning ordinance prohibits.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't trying to take your place or anything.
Oh, no. Feel free.
Let me think about it a minute, I thought about it now.
Give me your car keys.
I'd make the motion to table it.
Okay. Well, I mean, the idea would be to what's that?
No, we gotta tell this guy something, yeah.
Yeah, we've got to get back with this guy and let him know. So has he owned the property since before 1987?
No.
Okay.
Oh, no. He
So-
got, it's kind of convoluted how he acquired it, but he was a landscape guy taking care of the property, and the people said, I'm tired of paying you for cutting, here's the property.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So it sounds like we've got one in favor. But it seems like generally, do I see more heads shaking? Yeah, it seems like, oh, you're against it?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Okay. All right, let's move on. Thank you.
I say table it.
Got it.
I didn't know that's what table it meant. Okay. All right, then we'll move on, if there's no other discussion there, to the Finance, Building, and Development Committee, Payroll Tax Incentives. It's got my name behind it, but Mr. Hahn, are you ready to talk?
Yes.
I'd be happy to talk about it.
I hope you all got the copy of the thing that I emailed out. There was a memo explaining what we were talking about doing here. The mayor, Mark, and I, and it started way back. Greg Engelman was here when we first started talking about amending this ordinance that I failed to attach on my original email, but sent it out the second time. So, but basically, the only thing, I'll start with the easy ones first, I guess, in the memo that I sent, was the first one, was the Renaissance thing. I think that's pretty clear. We need to amend that ordinance to take that out of there, since we no longer have a Renaissance district. So we'll take that out of there. The ordinance as it's written, and it's kind of hard to explain, but it's all based on the payroll of a company that's coming in who's looking to get this incentive. If currently the way the ordinance is written, if they have a $1 million payroll or more, they qualify to apply for our incentive. However, the only thing that they are permitted to get incentivized is the amount over that original $1 million. That wasn't the way it was that we intended it to occur, so I'll take the blame for when this was done. I didn't read it or whatever, but it didn't get written the way that or approved the way that we envisioned the committee at the time. So what we'd like to do is amend it that if somebody has $1 million payroll or more, they qualify for the incentive for their total payroll. So I gave an example in there if you read that what it would be. And I think, did I correctly state that, Mayor? Is that the way that we understand that to be?
Yeah.
Well, it is, but I think we're going to confuse them now when we now, to go to the next one where you're going to drop it to 750. So
now we're wanting to drop it to 750 instead of
So it's going to be anything,
750
will be the threshold, and then it will qualify for the whole 750. So I think,
probably should have started with that one.
Yeah. Because what we want to do is get rid of the million and drop it to the 750 and then include it all. Right.
And then include it all.
Include it all, right.
Yeah, and the idea behind that when David and I were talking about it, is that right now we've got 2 companies that are taking advantage of this incentive, and that's where we think maybe the threshold is too high. And you know, initially I think we said drop it to maybe 500,000, but then thinking that we really don't know how to figure out how much that's going to impact us. So maybe we take a smaller step and say 750 and see how many more people we pick up.
So that's going to be new and existing, is that correct? If the existing hits that, are we still going to keep that wording?
Only new.
That's only new.
Only new.
That's only a new business coming into the city.
So existing, are we going to keep the $1 million?
No.
Right now, existing doesn't qualify unless they, how does that?
Well, the way we've got it, the way I've got it written here, and that's the second part of this thing, would be, and I said $1 million, but it should be 750. Just because that is the threshold we're lowering it to. And what we're saying that is if a business, an existing business that we currently have expands, and with that, and their expansion is a $500,000 or more improvement to their building, then they would qualify for that incentive if that pushes that over top of that new $750,000 limit.
Okay. So if they expand, okay, I got you. But the $1 million businesses are still.
Oh yeah, it's 750,000 and over is what we're proposing to change it all to.
All of them?
All of them.
Even the current $1 million?
The current ones.
Expansion.
So the current companies, so it's really to incentivize new companies to come to Erlanger.
I get that.
And then, but the existing companies, say Kroger builds an expansion.
That's a good example.
And they spend $500,000 on their facility, then we would give that payroll tax incentive to them as well. So if they're making an investment in their existing Erlanger property, then we would also offer that same.
Okay, that makes.
Because that pushes them over?
Not necessarily. I don't think it would, in my opinion, it wouldn't necessarily have to push them over. You know, I think having a company invest in the city helps form that glue that keeps them here.
Sure.
And that's what we want.
Incentive, yeah.
Now that's not the way I wrote it here.
Okay.
But I mean, so that means I must have misunderstood, I guess, what we had talked about. I was of the understanding that if that $500,000 expansion of their business with the new employees that expansion may bring, put them over that threshold, then that would then qualify them for the incentive.
Yeah.
Not just.
Yeah, they would still have to be over 750.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we're saying the same thing then.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is, okay, let's say like, I don't know, maybe I don't know of a good example, but I'm thinking maybe if Beacon Ortho
Right.
had 750,000,
That's
over
another good
750.
example because that actually occurred and wanted
Okay.
our incentive.
Yeah, and so right now they wouldn't necessarily qualify, and they have, let's say they have $1 million right now in payroll tax, and then they purchase a $1.5 million MRI machine, then that would make them qualify, in my opinion. It doesn't necessarily add payroll, but they've already got the payroll that's over the threshold
Right.
to begin with.
Right, if they're already there, that's correct,
Yeah.
yes.
We don't have to do like back pay, do we?
No,
Okay.
No,
no, no.
I didn't hear what
She said we wouldn't have to do back pay, like, yeah.
Only if it's your MRI.
Okay, so,
and these people don't qualify if they are included in our other incentive, not our incentive, but the state incentive. If somebody's taking advantage of our state incentive, then since we're already putting incentive dollars into that, they couldn't say, well, I want both. Yeah,
Oh, gotcha.
yeah.
so something else that I thought about as I was reading through this. Okay, so we're offering this for 10 years.
That's correct.
What do you think about the 10-year term? Is that
5 years sounds better.
The
Yeah.
10-year term was set because that's what the current the Kentucky incentive program is, and that's the reason it was set at the 10 years.
that makes sense then? Okay, thank you. I saw someone, okay.
Are you planning on rolling this out with the job fair thing? Did I say that?
I suppose we could.
Well,
Let's see, that's this month.
The ordinance won't be ready and adopted by
We
that
wouldn't,
point, but
Dangle the worm.
We could talk
But-
about it. We could certainly talk about what we're drafting. Maybe even offer it for people to look at. Yeah, it's not a bad idea. That would be a good chance to promote it.
Make it out there.
Yeah. Okay. So does that address everything?
that addresses the three things.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So is that something that you can?
Yeah, it's as clear as mud to me, so I'll talk to you two after the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. I agree, Jack. When I was writing it, I had a heck of a time drafting this thing.
Okay.
That's not what I wrote.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right.
If there's no other discussion, then we'll move on to the 315C Pleasure Isle Drive Master Commissioner sale. Mr. Wickman, are you prepared to talk about that?
Yes, sir. Discussed it